Welcome to our instruction or teacher modeling video, where I'm going to kind of show you how I would break down and do the task that you are going to be doing yourself when you read our two readings for today. So when you see this on the screen right here, this is the text I'm going to be reading as an example. Feel free to follow along. And another really important thing to know is that, yes, you have your Google form reading here. This is just a copy and pasted image, but you're going to have an attached Google Doc, which I will scroll over to right now, where you will see that these are just this readings, the example one, and then the two that you're going to read on your own. And while you are in this Google Doc, you can, of course, code and highlight it. But if you look, for example, like right here, there for vocabulary words, I am going to kind of give you in parentheses in this document some kind of clues at what these words mean to help you kind of break down these texts that are a little bit more complicated. So definitely go to the Google Doc for help with that, and select your quotes for later when you actually are going to be writing and answering your question. So quickly, this reading is looking at the perspective, same skill. What you're going to be looking at is what is someone's perspective, their point of view, how do they feel or think about something, and why. So for this reading here, this is a primary source reading from Frederick Douglass. We, of course, have seen Frederick Douglass before the war, but now this is getting to the point where the war is just about over. It's in our introductory text here. This was given, excerpted from a speech given by Douglass to the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, so other groups of abolitionists and people against slavery, in April of 1865. Again, the war went from 1861 to 1865, so this is the end of the war. So first, I already know, well, who is this person? This is, well, Frederick Douglass, who was a former slave himself, a black man, and he is going to be talking to other people who are sympathetic to his cause about what the black man wants about the end of the war. Because again, this is one of the groups that is like, well, freed blacks, what do they want? How do we interact with them? Well, here's someone's perspective. So reading the text, please follow along, but I'm going to go to the doc, because again, there are clues here. We may be asked, I say, why we want it, which is the right to vote, what he's talking about. And we, again, is African Americans or freed slaves. I will tell you why we want it. We want it because it is our right, first of all. No class of men, without insulting their own nature, can be content with any deprivation of their rights. So he's talking about voting and the right to vote. Why should African Americans or freed slaves have the right to vote? This is his topic and what he's talking about. We want it again as a means for educating our race. Men are so constituted, are made, that they derive or find their conviction, which are strong beliefs, of their own possibilities largely from the estimate formed by others. So he's kind of saying that like the way people think about themselves is kind of based on how other people think about them too. So how are we as African Americans going to think about it? That's already kind of what I'm thinking to myself is like, this is his topic. So like, how are freed slaves, now free black people, going to be getting the right to vote? So following along again in the middle here, if nothing is expected of a people, that people will find it difficult to contradict or oppose that expectation. So if nothing is expected of them, then they're not going to think that they can really do anything. By depriving us of suffrage or the right to vote, you affirm or reinforce our incapacity or inability to form an intelligent judgment respecting public men and public measures. You declare before the world that we are unfit to exercise the elective franchise, which is voting, and by this means lead us to undervalue ourselves, to put a low estimate upon ourselves, and to feel that we have no possibilities like other men. So kind of looking this over, reading it definitely a little more slowly and looking it over. It's not the first time I've read this. He's saying that, highlighting and quoting here, this is a good quote that I would say, by depriving us of suffrage, you reinforce our incapacity to form an intelligent judgment. Essentially, that you are saying that we're not fit to do this. So essentially it's fitting into the stereotype that like this racist stereotype that people had, that black people weren't kind of able to take care of themselves or make decisions for themselves, and that they were just better off being slaves. And he's saying by denying people the right to vote, that they are kind of like fitting into this stereotype and saying that people are going to keep believing this, that if we don't give black people the right to vote, then it kind of like makes it seem like people are saying that they can't make decisions for themselves and that they want the right to vote because it proves that they will actually be able to take care of themselves and make decisions for their own lives. Second paragraph, what I ask for the Negro is not benevolence or being like given something super nice, not pity, not sympathy, but simply justice. And the crowd applauds. Yes, good, justice. The American people have always been anxious to know what they shall do with us, us being, again, freed slaves. Everybody has asked the question, and they learned to ask it early of the abolitionists. What shall we do with the Negro? I had but one answer from the beginning. Do nothing with us. All I ask is give him a chance to stand on his own legs. Let him alone. If you see him on his way to school, let him alone. Don't disturb him. If you see him going to the dinner table at a hotel, let him go. If you see him going to the ballot box, let him alone. Don't disturb him. So looking at the second quote, this kind of gets to the question again, or paragraph of like, well, how are we going to treat new freed slaves, integrating them into society? And Frederick Douglass is kind of saying, just treat us like anybody else. Really let him alone. All I ask is give him a chance to stand on his own two legs. Kind of like we just want to be treated like anybody else and have the chance to live our lives just like anybody else in society. And so if I were asking the question, what was Frederick Douglass's perspective on freed blacks' rights after the Civil War? I would go back and look at the first paragraph and kind of say, well, he definitely says right kind of here talking about the right to vote, that he wants the right to vote. That's what we want. His perspective is he wants the right to vote. And then he gives some evidence right here where he says men are so constituted that, again, they think of themselves the same way that other people think of them. And that if you kind of like deny us the right to vote, then you declare before the world that we are unfit to exercise the elective franchise. And essentially it's going to just make people continue to think racist things about us if we're not allowed to make decisions about our lives. So I would put it all together. And what you're going to do when you compare these two texts is put it all together and say Frederick Douglass's perspective on the freed blacks' rights was that freed blacks should be able to have the right to vote because it would prove that they have the ability to kind of make decisions for their own lives. And then in the second paragraph here, and that this allows them just to live a normal life, just like anybody else. And that's really what they don't want. They don't want any special treatment. They just want to be able to have the same equal opportunities as everybody else. And that would be what I'd write. So again, these are more complicated texts. You're going to have to reread, use the vocabulary. If there's a word I didn't put in commas that you don't know, use Google, search it, look it up. This is the glory of the internet at your fingertips. But again, make sure that you are reading the texts carefully and coding specifically in your Google Doc for a quote that you will use later in your writing for what was this person's perspective and what evidence do you have to back up your answer. Next, you're going to read 2 texts on your own. Make sure to watch the video for those ones too in the overview.